Welcome to another episode of Discovering Your Mission, the podcast where we explore the journeys, values, and purpose that drive extraordinary leaders to make a lasting impact on the world around them. Let me start with a question. Can you identify the turning points in your life? Perhaps it was a mentor who saw something in you before you saw it in yourself. Perhaps it was a conversation that changed your perspective. Perhaps it was an opportunity that altered the trajectory of your future. The truth is, every successful person can point to moments that changed everything. And if you pay close attention, you'll often discover that those moments were made possible by someone who believed in you and challenged you and simply opened a door. Today's guest believes those moments matter more than we realize. Joining me today is Dr. Linda Garcia, Executive Director of the Center for Community College Student Engagement, known to many of us simply as CCCSE. For years, Dr. Garcia helped colleges across the nation better understand the student experience by listening deeply to the voices of students and challenging institutions to design environments where learners can truly thrive. In our conversation today, we discuss why connection matters more than ever, what students are telling us that institutions still aren't fully hearing, and how community colleges can create the kind of turning points that changes lives for generations. This is a conversation about belonging. It's a conversation about opportunity. And ultimately, it's a conversation about the responsibility each of us has to become a turning point in someone else's story. Before I begin, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the EDU Ledger, for their continued support of Discovering Your Mission and for their commitment to advancing meaningful conversations across higher education. And now, my conversation with Dr. Linda Garcia. Greetings, everyone. Once again, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Discovering Your Mission. Today, we have someone who is an amazing leader, someone who I certainly admire their work. And if you work in the community college space, you certainly have heard of her work, but now you're going to get a chance to know her. Dr. Linda Garcia serves as the Executive Director for the Center for Community College Student Engagement. That's a mouthful, known as CCCSE. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Garcia.
Well, Dr. Mordecai, it is a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for the invitation and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. So I've got a ton of questions, but we're going to do our best to get through all of these. First, let's kind of level set. So folks here, you're Executive Director of CCCSE. They've probably seen you at the various conferences and spaces, but how did you get there? Let's just kind of start there. What's been the journey for Dr. Garcia before we really begin to unpack all these questions?
Well, Dr. Mordecai, I have to say, when I think about how I got here, I always think about two words, turning points. I always think about the mentors, the opportunities that were presented in my life that got me to this position. In fact, I had no plans to be the executive director for CCCSE. About 22 years ago, I was enrolled in the Community College Leadership Program under Dr. John Roosh at UT Austin. And I'll never forget when Kay McClenny, the first executive director of CCCSE, came to our class to speak. And that's when CCCSE was starting. And so never did I believe in my wildest dreams that I would lead one day CCCSE. Well, anyways, the reason I got there is because of a mentor who tapped me on the shoulder, and I was working at Texas Southmost College and University of Texas at Brownsville. It was a 4-year and 2-year in one location. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, have you thought about the graduate program?" I said, "Yeah, I'm enrolled in the master's." He goes, "No, the doctoral program, the community college leadership program, that's where you need to go. In fact, you have an appointment on this day and this time, 5 hours north from where we live, and you better be there." Now, I call that intrusive mentoring. We talk about intrusive advising for students. This is intrusive mentoring who absolutely changed my life. That was a turning point in my career. And so anyways, I met mentors along the way who just provided more turning points, and it got me to this position. And it has been the best opportunity, the best experience. Love working. My parents say, or my husband says, "You never work." No, because it's just fun for me. It's really fun, just focused on the student experience, amplifying their experiences, their voices, and making sure community colleges can listen and hear what they need to make sure they get from the start line to the finish line.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Intrusive mentoring. I've never heard that before. That's got to be a takeaway. Let's jump into it. So with the work that you all do with CCCSE, you're directly or hearing the voices of students. What is something students are telling institutions right now that higher education leaders still are not fully hearing?
That's a great question. If I had to summarize just the decades of assessing findings just into one message, it would be this: that students are telling us that they don't need colleges to care for them in theory. They need colleges to demonstrate that they care through design. So when we think about, there's a conversation of guided pathways. You know, we talk about relationships, we talk about proactive support, we talk about the sense of belonging. How do we design the way we show up to students when they come to our campuses? And we know that many students, they may depart because it's just not a lack of motivation, but it could be the lack of connection. And so students are asking, do I matter here? Does anyone know who I am? Is there a path that I can actually navigate? Where is that connection? And I think with the conversation with Guided Pathways, it has really amplified that, but we really need to pause and listen. And the reason I say that, because in the work that CCCSE does, we do a lot of focus group work, and there are so many videos of students who talk about connection. In fact, we interviewed a student 3 times in one semester. In the first semester, in that fall semester, that first month, he's excited about college. 1 month later after that, he says, college is a little tough, but I'm gonna hang in there. And then 1 month later after that, he says, college is not for everyone. I guess I'm one of those. CCCSE goes back, he's not there. That student didn't feel connection. We forward to about maybe 2 years ago, we do a similar project, and we interviewed a student who decided to stop out. And he didn't return, but with the help of the college, we were able to find that student. And you know what, Dr. Mordecai, he talks about what he wished the college would have done for him. He said, nobody knew I was gone. Nobody contacted me. Nobody did this. I want to apologize to faculty for wasting their time. He talked about connection. So I cannot resonate this even more so with well, I want to resonate this with more so, but it's really about connection. Students are saying, I have things that I am balancing in my world, in my life, but I need connection. I need someone to know my story to get me from the start line to the finish line. Because if there is just one person that knows who I am and knows my story, I'm more likely to persist and continue and get to that finish line.
I love it. I love it. Great insight there. You know, I was just reading this morning about another institution, some of the challenges that they're dealing with up in the East Coast, Midwest areas. There's so much going on right now. Yes, there's a conversation about restoring public trust. Yes, we're talking about the need to improve completion rates, student success rates, address affordability. But of these various pressures that higher education is currently experiencing, what do you believe are the pressures or the pressure that institutions are probably not paying attention to in the way that you would see as someone who's looking at the data every day? You're saying you really need to probably give more attention to this.
Now, all those pressures that you talked about are significant and they're notable, and we should absolutely pay attention to each and every one. But when I think about the examples that you shared of these pressures, and I'm thinking, where could we start that could create maybe a domino effect to impact the others? And I think about public trust and the confidence in higher education, because again, as I mentioned, students are bringing their hopes, their aspirations, and their dreams, and their belief that education can change their lives. The question is whether their experiences are reinforced or diminished in that belief. So we have to think about where are students deciding to go? Are they deciding to go to the community college, or are they deciding to go nowhere at all? And there has been lots of study about focusing on students who decide to go nowhere at all. So we know students are looking for opportunity. They're not rejecting the opportunity. The question is, are they asking, are they the best pathway to that opportunity? And we have to answer that question and make sure that we connect what they learn with workforce, making sure that we talk about careers in the beginning rather than the end. We need to make sure that what they invest in, that they're going to get something out in return. And so I believe Guided Pathways is a conversation that is really focused and really supporting that to help make sure that students are trusting the foundation of community colleges.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Let's switch gears here. There are so many institutions that talk about the data flow. They have all these manners in which how they like to gather the data, and then they want to make data informed decisions. And certainly they're talking about doing that work. However, you get a chance to see behind the scenes, and there's what truly is leading to transformational institutions. And then there is just folks that have the data and kind of becomes an initiative, but it doesn't change the actual fabric of the institution. My question to you is what separates these institutions that genuinely transform student outcomes from just those that are just implementing some initiatives?
Well, let me just say, it's great when colleges are doing the CCCSE survey to start there, to look at the student voice, the student experience. And I say that in a laughing way because I'm promoting CCCSE as a start for transformation. But really, it's about asking that question, what is it like to be a student here? Because a lot of colleges will focus on just initiatives, but if you really want to transform, it's taking that pause and asking that question and looking at the experience of students and their perspective and just organizing the institution just around about helping them to succeed. So when colleges think about transformation, it's more than looking at their data, but it's also challenging their assumptions, making changes across departments and just divisions, just understanding what the responsibility is of the staff, the faculty to help students succeed, because it's just not one person or one department that's in charge of student success. Everybody has a role. And I say everybody, it's from the board of trustee to the groundskeeper. And so it's important to understand that and also think about students. They don't experience colleges through an organizational chart, but they're experiencing it through the way they move through the college, the interactions with any single person on campus, whether it's that they feel connected, do they have a plan, making sure that we understand from the start to the finish line what every student is experiencing. I will never forget, there was this one college that we were working with, and they decided to map out the student journey. And they invited students into the conversation. And they were thinking about, we must transform ourselves, but to transform ourselves, we must listen to students. So what they did is they invited the students to, let's just talk about onboarding. And they put different, stopping points on what onboarding means. One thing about that really emerged from that is that a theme that emerged was that students were waiting at each point. And they talked about their challenges and their frustration. And so the college said, we must remove that barrier. If students are thinking that we're putting barriers in front of them, they have to stop and wait, get a ticket, go to the next department, get a ticket, and stop and wait. So that was one step of transformation for the college. But really, it's about pausing, understanding the student experience, and really just taking some perspective taking on what they're going through and what their lives are like, and just removing those barriers.
This episode of Discovering Your Mission is brought to you by The EDU Ledger, a leading publication committed to advancing the conversations shaping today's higher education landscape. From innovative practices to policy insights and leadership perspectives, The EDU Ledger brings clarity to the issues surrounding educational opportunity that matter most. To stay informed and engaged, visit theeduledger.com. Now, let's get to today's conversation. Now I want to kind of unpack a little bit of your personal story, which we're going to get into, because I heard that at one point in time you wanted to be a journalist. So we're going to get into that here in just a second. But before that one, your own personal story that you speak of is one of a multi-generational sacrifice. It's one of aspiration. How has your family's journey shaped the way that you interpret the mission of community colleges today?
Great question. And I love talking about this because my parents didn't go to college, but never did I think that I would not go to college. It was not an option. I had to go. And they always talked about, you must be better, because my parents, they grew up, working they were migrant farm workers. And, I think about my grandparents that came from Mexico over here. And so they talked about opportunity. And that's what community college is. It's all about opportunity, especially giving second chances to folks, or if they have children, or if they're working. So many things that they're trying to balance, but it's about opportunity for them to transform themselves, to provide opportunities, just not for themselves, but for their family. And so I think about this one time with my grandparents, And I said to my grandfather in Spanish, I got accepted and I'm going to go to this college. And jokingly, my grandmother said, oh no, she should stay and work the ways of the kitchen and do all that cooking. And she was just joking. But my grandfather, I'll never forget, it was so notable. He just said, I didn't bring the family here for this. There's an opportunity. So I really feel like they sacrificed so much, my grandparents, then my parents, to get me to this start line. And so I just feel like I am living my ancestors' wildest dreams, and community colleges provide those opportunities to live those wild dreams and just to make sure that we meet students where they're at and making sure that we get them. And I keep on saying over and over again, from the start line to the finish line, because again, students don't come to fail, they come with their dreams, and they're relying on the community colleges to transform their lives and to get them to that finish line, to get them to that dream.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now let's take a view into this journalism track, right? So how do we get from journalist to executive director of CCCSE?
I know. I mean, you would never expect that. So the reason I would want to become a journalist, and I got a broadcast journalism degree at UT Austin. I was interviewed for my local station before I graduated high school because I was a drum major, and they were wanting to talk about drum majors in the Rio Grande Valley. And so I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I really appreciate his approach and wanting to know my story and how and what my next steps were. And I'm thinking, I would love to be a storyteller and communicate. And because people always have something to share, but we just need to listen and dig in deep. So that's why I enrolled at UT for the broadcast journalism degree, and I loved it. It really taught me how to, I never thought I was a great writer, but it really taught me how to approach writing in a way that it was storytelling impactful. So anyways, but it goes back to the turning points, Dr. Mordecai, that I mentioned, is that when you meet people along the way in your journey, because my goal was I was aspiring to be Diane Sawyer. In fact, I met her. I have a photo of her. It's in my parents' home. And I'm there. I mean, I got up at 3 a.m. in the morning because she did Good Morning America at the UT campus with Charlie Gibson. And so I have a picture with her. And that was my goal. And I did a little bit of stint, I worked in print and a little bit of broadcasting here in Austin, just a very short time. But you meet people along the way and they tap you on the shoulder and they say, have you considered X? Have you considered Y? No, I haven't. I think you need to do that. And then that's why I call it intrusive mentoring, because they pave the way. They don't just tell you, but they plan a way for you to get there. And so that's what happened just along the way, turning points. And that's how I got here to CCCSE. And that's the connection from journalism to executive director.
I love it. And it's transferable skill sets. And I'll just say this as someone, I was a mass communication major. And so, the energy, the creativity that I still miss in those regards, I get it out through writing and podcasting. So it's pretty cool to know that we share that background. Let me ask this. You've already been talking about the turning point. Let's kind of talk about a turning point for higher education. If you could redesign the student experience from ground up for today's learners, what should community colleges stop doing immediately?
That is an excellent question. And I thought about this. If I could redesign the student experience from the ground up, community colleges would stop expecting students to navigate the institution on their own. I mean, think about the departments, the names we use. It's so foreign to students. Students don't struggle because they lack aspiration, but think about the way we design, the way we show up to them. And I want you to think about how we show up to them, whether it's we hand them a catalog, whether it's on the virtual, back then we used to have the printed catalog, or the way we communicate on the website. And we just say, good luck. Here you are on your own. It's kind of like when you think about registration, it feels like you're filing taxes rather than planning a future. It's very complicated. And especially I think about my experience as a first generation student. I was absolutely lost. My parents didn't go to college. I was just trying to figure it out. But why do we want to design this opportunity for students to try to figure it out? Why don't we just guide them? Think of that Netflix, experience. When you watch a movie, you'll have some movies, here are some recommendations to your likings. What about if we had a plan that was really customized to students because we've listened to them, we've learned, we asked them about their goals right in the beginning, And then we tie that to some plan right away. When I look at the CCCSE data, I see that there are still a lot of students that don't have academic plans. Let's just start there. And even with guided pathways, we're talking about it is so essential to have that for students, because students won't know how to navigate. They need that GPS to get to that finish line. So I just think about how can we redesign our the way we show up so it takes a perspective of students, because we're asking students to conform to our ways, but we need to be more student ready for them. And we've been talking about that for a long time.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. There are a number of brand new college presidents that are hitting the scene. I mean, it's the next generation of community college presidents that are entering in. And I was having a conversation with one of them, and this is the reason why I wanted to ask you this particular question, because the very interesting thing that happens with data like CCCSE is that it can truly challenge what had been some long-term held assumptions that the institution had. And here comes this incoming president now looking at the data saying, hold on, we actually are not doing or need to address what the student voice, what the institution is telling us. What advice do you have, especially for these new incoming presidents, on what to do when the data is not in alignment with what has been long-term traditions, held assumptions from that institution?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. That happens to us quite a bit when CCCSE goes out to the field and we talk about data or we lead a data workshop. It's not necessarily the president, but there are other leaders that will challenge the data. And it's as if during our time there, they go through these stages of grieving. And so they challenge it, they're denying it, and then they start, some emotions start coming like, no, this is not our student. But by the time we finish the conversation, then there's some acceptance there. The data should really create some curiosity. And I think about the data as, view it as a gift. Students are telling us how they actually experience the institution, not how we hope they experience it. And so students, they're not experiencing the institution by our mission statements or strategic plans, but think about the experiences with registration, advising, financial aid, and classroom. So when we look at the data tells us what, but if we want to know the why, bring students into the conversation. And as a new community college leader, if there is a pause in reviewing the data, invite students into the conversation to validate what you are seeing in the data. And especially, for example, and I always talk about academic plans, or maybe let's talk about orientation. You know, we always say orientation is mandatory, but when we ask students through a survey, you'll see students are saying, well, no, it's not mandatory. We invite them to the conversation. Well, why are you not attending orientation? Well, because I'm working and I don't have the times that it's offered, I can't go. You know, you start understanding why students are saying what they're saying in a survey. So really, I encourage new community college leaders to really bring in the curiosity and really embracing this as an opportunity to invite students into the conversation. Because once you hear students talk about their experience, that's what it is, not what we hope for it to be.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Listen, I know that we are like almost at time, so let me try to fit two more questions in here. Certainly, I've got to ask the last question about your personal mission statement. So let me ask one more. When your career is ultimately viewed in retrospect, what impact do you hope your work has had on students, institutions, the broader community college movement?
And I'm just going to go back to those two words, Dr. Mordecai. I really hope people will think about that I helped create training points for students, for institutions, for community colleges. I hope my work it provides students who hear the word yes to them. And the reason I say that as a turning point, because I am reflecting on a student that CCCSE interviewed. It was a while ago, but this turning point was the student said, I chose this community college because this is the only place that said yes to me. Yes, I can get an education. Yes, I can get a career. Yes, I can learn how to dress. I learned that all here. That's what he said. It was a turning point for him. I just want to be involved in those turning points for those students, because think about when that student said this is the only place that said yes to him, think about everything underneath that statement. This student probably heard no a lot. No, you can't do this. No, you're not capable. But no, here you are, and we're going to provide that turning point just for you.
Wow, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. As you know, the show is called Discovering Your Mission, and so I love to ask my guest, as the very final question that I have for them is, what is their personal mission statement and why? And now's your time to share, Dr. Garcia. What is your personal mission statement and why?
Oh my gosh, Dr. Mordecai, can we just call this session Turning Points? Because I am a high believer of that, and I am going to bring it back to that. And when I just look at my life and I look at the mentors who believed in me, the family members who sacrificed for me, and the opportunities that changed my trajectory, my personal mission statement goes back to the previous answer that I answered to your question, and the previous is really just to help create turning points that expand what's possible for people. And I hope other people do the same for others. And so that is my theme. That has been my theme working at CCCSE. That is my theme making sure college presidents, faculty, and staff understand that they are the designers in these turning points. They are considered the heroes to get the student from the start line to the finish line. And the way we do that is to listen, to pause, think of what the student is saying, but being strategic on how we can create those turning points for students. Because again, like I said, they're bringing their hopes, aspirations, and dreams. And they don't come to fail. They come to be successful. But along that journey, they need some navigation and they need some opportunity. And that's where I hope that resonates with community college leaders.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Linda Garcia, Executive Director for the Center for Community College Student Engagement, known as CCCSE. Dr. Garcia, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
What a remarkable conversation with Dr. Linda Garcia. As I reflect on our discussion, I keep coming back to two words that surfaced again and again in this interview: turning point. Dr. Garcia shared how mentors created turning points in her own life. She described how opportunities changed her trajectory, and perhaps most importantly, she challenged us to think about how institutions can create turning points for students. 3 lessons stood out for me. First, connection creates turning points. One of the most powerful things from our conversation was that students are not simply seeking courses, programs, or credentials. They're seeking connection. They want to know that they matter. They want to know that someone actually sees them. They want to know that someone cares whether they succeed. As leaders and educators and professionals, we should never underestimate the power of a simple relationship. Sometimes the difference between persistence and departure is knowing that one person believes in you. Secondly, listening creates turning points. Dr. Garcia reminded us that data is not something to fear. Data is an invitation to learn. Too often, institutions fall in love with assumptions. Great institutions remain curious. The most transformational colleges are willing to ask difficult questions, listen, and answer questions honestly, and then act on what they learn. Students are constantly telling us what they need. The question is whether we are willing to listen. And third, belief creates turning points. One of my favorite moments from today's conversation was when Dr. Garcia shared the story of a student who said that the community college was the only place that told him yes. Think about that. The only place that said yes. For many students, community colleges are more than institutions. They are places of possibility, places where potential is recognized, places where futures are rewritten. That story reminds us that leadership is not simply about managing organizations. Leadership instead is about expanding what people believe is possible for themselves. And that brings me to my final thought. As I listened to Dr. Garcia, I found myself reflecting on the people who created turning points in my personal life. The mentors, the teachers, the leaders who challenged me, encouraged me, and opened doors I never imagined could open for me. Every one of us can name people who changed our story. The challenge is this: whose story will you help change? Whose potential will you recognize? Whose future might look different because you took the time to encourage and mentor and advocate, or simply say, I believe in you. You may never fully know the impact of that moment, but that moment may become the turning point someone remembers for the rest of their life. My sincerest thanks to Dr. Linda Garcia for joining us today and for her extraordinary leadership on behalf of students and community colleges across the nation. And thank you once again to our sponsor, the EDU Ledger, for their continued support of Discovering Your Mission. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I encourage you to subscribe, share this episode with a colleague, and visit itsdrmordecai.com for more leadership insights, articles, podcast episodes, and resources designed to help you discover and live your personal mission. Until next time, remember, the greatest leaders don't simply achieve success, they create turning points. Take care, everyone.